We'll stand and call the meeting to order. Please raise the flag there for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The school board will convene into closed session tonight to consider the employment, promotion, compensation, and performance evaluation data of any public employee who is the governmental body in their jurisdiction or exercises responsibility under Wisconsin statutes 19.85 for and 1 for and C for administrators' contracts, the golf coach, the assistant baseball coach, the assistant soccer coach, and the administrative secretary. We then have a presentation by the law firm, and I will let Mr. Glutke introduce our speaker.
Yeah, Brian Waterman is here. He's a colleague of Mary Durbeck, and he's going to speak on board procedures and Robert's Rules of Order.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Glad to be here with you this evening. We're going to spend about 15 or 20 minutes tonight. I've been asked to talk a little bit about the school board members and the roles they play, the role that the board plays as a whole, and some of the speech issues with school board members, and some of the techniques and best practices that boards can use in order to make sure that meetings are run efficiently and effectively. And this is really a version of a presentation. I think Alex seen this at one of the conferences he went to. We've been giving this presentation to boards all around the state. And as you can imagine, in these times, it's conducting orderly meetings and the proper role of the board versus administration versus the public versus individual board members is extremely timely. So we're going to get started here. This gives you an overview of the things that we're going to talk about. So role of the board member, speech issues as far as what the First Amendment says, communication at board meetings, communication outside of board meetings. Also, we're going to talk about some of the unlikely circumstances in which the board needs to take action regarding speech of a certain member. And then finally, we're going to end with a little bit of a summary of Robert's Rules of Order. So part one, we're going to start with school board member speech. Now, the school district really has a number of policies that address this, and really those policies are what govern or guides, I should say, along the bylaws, the board's conduct. The board as a whole is responsible for making decisions. Individual board members don't have the authority of the board. I know that sounds kind of self-evident, but oftentimes there's some gray areas with regard to who's acting on behalf of the board and who's not. The board president acts and functions as the official spokesperson. And board members should indicate that their opinions are those of individuals when they're speaking in public. And this is all by policy. Also, again, best practices that we see through boards through WASB and through boards throughout the state. As far as the function of the board versus administration, really the board as a whole is viewed as an entity that guides the administration, that provides policy, and the administrators are the ones who are charged with executing that policy and guidance from the board, as well as ensuring that the district is compliant with the rules of the district, the rules of DPI, as well as state statutes. So what about First Amendment? Generally, board members don't lose their right to free speech just because they're board members. However, as I mentioned before, they can't speak on behalf of the board. And so that's an important point to make. They still have to maintain confidentiality. And so things that are talked about, for instance, in closed session, are required to maintain confidentiality in that regard. Also, private information they might come across in the course of their duties, such as pupil records, things of that nature. Board members who might create a public forum on their own in their official capacity need to be sure that they're cognizant of the First Amendment rights of others and issues related to viewpoint discrimination, for instance. So if you're a board member acting in your official capacity and you're engaging with constituents, it's important that you as the board member, because you've created that forum, that you're not discriminating based on viewpoint discrimination. Okay, so now we're going to get a little bit into speech at board meetings. There's really two different types of speech that we talk about. One is considered pure speech. Now, pure speech is defined as the expression or communication of thoughts, opinions, ideas by itself. And the board, when can it regulate pure speech? Only 3 requirements are met, and it's a high standard. One, if the speech represents a clear and present danger to society, the danger presented outweighs the individual's interest in pure speech, and the restriction is narrowly tailored to a compelling government interest. So if you think about a board member who might make a threat of physical violence, for instance. Doesn't happen very often, but you'd be surprised. And in that case, the board could take action to regulate that speech. The other type of speech we talk about is called speech plus. So what's speech plus? Speech plus is when you have pure speech, but then it's combined with some sort of action. So for instance, a board member may be talking during the board meeting and expressing that pure speech, but if the board member continues after the matter has been dropped or otherwise disrupts the board meeting in that regard, the board can take action to regulate that type of speech, simply because it's in the best interest of the board for its efficiency in running the meeting. So how can the board regulate speech plus? Well, the board can adopt rules and procedures. That's the best practice for decorum. It can regulate the conduct that interferes with the meeting. Also, we'll talk a little bit later about the Robert's Rules of Order. And following Robert's Rules of Order or similar procedural structures that give the tools to the school board during the meetings is also an effective way of preventing that speech or regulating that speech. The board can also limit discussion on certain items to those noticed in closed session. Communication outside of board meetings. We'll hit on this quickly. Yes, board members can speak outside of a properly noticed board meeting about matters of public concern. Of course, they can do that. However, again, they can't represent that they're speaking on behalf of the board. They can only speak in an individual capacity, and they have an obligation to make that clear to those who they're expressing it to. Additionally, confidentiality, again, in closed session needs to be maintained even when outside of the meetings. And there's a number of school board policies. You have them in your policies that are reviewed before I came tonight, and most school districts do, that can help guide the board when it's looking at speech of its members or speech during its meetings. Those policies have to do with board authority, board ethics, public records policies, open meetings policies, and similar types of policies. Okay, so the second part we're going to get into is what can the board, or in some cases citizens, do in response to speech that's outside the regular bounds of what would be considered acceptable by board members or the board. So we listed here a few. Of course, these are extreme examples. Again, they don't come up very often, but they are something to be aware of because as board members, you could be subjected to these types of actions if your behavior is not in line with the board's policies and the law. So what kind of actions can be taken? Recall, of course, removal, censure, ban, defamation suits, and harassment injunctions. So we're going to go quickly through all these. I won't spend too much time on them. So recall, you're probably familiar with. Recall is a statutory procedure of removing someone from office prior to the completion of their term. The recall statute says that electors of any district may petition for the recall of a board member following the first year of his or her term in office by submitting a petition to the district clerk. Removal. So removal is a judicial process. So a petition that anyone, including the board, can petition the circuit court judge, and for cause, the circuit court judge may remove a school board member. For cause is statutorily defined, and it's defined as inefficiency, neglect of duty, official misconduct, or malfeasance in office. Next one, censure. So censure is a tool used by school boards to formally reprimand members for their conduct that they might find disagreeable or against their rules. There's no legal authority for enforcement, and typically it's something that is symbolic in nature. However, I did want to bring to your attention the recent case out of the Fifth Circuit that we had that has bearing on this. So this Fifth Circuit case, Wilson versus Houston Community College, this was a board member on the board of the community college who had made public comments, interviews and such in opposition to the majority on the board. And he sued, after he was censured by the board, he sued in federal district court as a violation of his First Amendment rights. And the district court dismissed his claim. And the Fifth Circuit, when it took it up, it reversed and said that a reprimand against an elected official for speech addressing a matter of public concern is an actionable First Amendment claim. So in other words, it can't be used as a political weapon. There has to be some sort of misconduct involved. That is contrary to some other circuits, and so now it's being taken up as we speak by the Supreme Court, who's granted appeal to it. So they'll help to decide the discrepancy between or among the different circuits. Okay, ban. So the school board could take action to ban an individual, a school board member or otherwise. The school board has the purview to ban from its property any individual who it believes is interfering with its business. So it could take that action. However, when it comes to a school board member, the board has to be careful that whatever policy it adopts, one, is consistent and uniformly applied, but also that doesn't violate First Amendment rules, in that the school, if it was a school board member, they'd be allowed to come on the property and access public schools in order to conduct their official business, meaning coming to meetings and other similar duties. What's the board not allowed to do? Again, it can't prevent a board member from coming to a meeting, and it can't violate the First Amendment rights in that regard. Quickly, defamation suits. So defamation, again, a suit that can be brought either by the board or by anyone else who believes that they're a victim of certain kinds of speech. The elements of the defamation suit: the statement has to be false. The statement is communicated by speech, conduct, or in writing to a person other than the person defamed. Communication tends to harm one's reputation. And in the case of a public official, such as board members, they have to show actual malice. So the statement that was made had to be a reckless disregard of whether it was false or not. And the final one is harassment injunction. So this is, again, a statutory procedure in extreme cases where board members or others present a harassing threat to the board or to anyone else in the community. You may be familiar with TROs, temporary restraining orders, and then injunctions, keeping people away from others. So how do we prevent getting into this kind of situation at all? Again, it's extremely unusual for it to happen, but I have seen it happen in school districts across the state. And the school districts that are able to avoid these types of actions or even these types of controversies that lead to these actions are those that follow a few best practices. One is to implement and consistently adhere to policies regarding the roles and responsibilities of school board and individual members. I talked a little bit about that here at the beginning of our talk, in that the district has in place those types of policies, and consistent adherence to those kinds of policies is really important for maintaining order and addressing any concerns that the board might have with individual members who may not be following those policies. The second one, following Robert's Rules of Order, and similar to district policies in that regard, is an open meetings law. So when you conduct your meetings, that's a way that you can set the stage for an orderly discussion, orderly deliberation, and orderly votes. And again, we'll talk about Robert's Rules in just a second. That's one example of how you can structure the meeting in a way that minimizes disruption, that everybody can be heard in a respectful way, but that will help prevent leading to some of those actions I just talked about. And then finally, considering appropriate channels of information flow, both internally and externally, meaning how is the board's guidance that I talked about at the beginning, the board's guidance and the board's policy making, how is that communicated internally to administration or to staff, but also externally, various positions, whether it be litigation the district's involved in or capital project, whatever it is, there should be identified clear people who are in charge of that information flow. So you don't, as I said at the beginning, There's a First Amendment right for all board members to talk outside of the meeting, for instance, about things that are of public concern that are important to them. But when you're talking on behalf of the district, that information flow and channeling it through identified and authorized individuals on the board or the administration is extremely important. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about tonight is Robert's Rules of Order. Organize my notes here. Okay, so for those of you who have ever thumbed through a Robert's Rules of Order book, you know that it's long and it's boring and there's lots of great techniques there, but it's difficult to absorb, right? And so I'm not going to try and cover all that tonight in my short time, but I will say that it's extremely important to become familiar with that as a board member. I'm not saying you have to become a parliamentarian and memorize all the rules, but having a basic understanding of how to make a motion and what those different types of motions do, or points, those are important. It's important for engaging in a civil and deliberate way during board meetings. So the first thing to talk about is points. And points are really, some say they fall under motions, but really there's no vote on them, right? So for instance, a point of order. If you were to be concerned about the way a meeting was being run and you felt that it was contrary to procedure, you could raise a point of order with the chairperson, and or in this case the board president. And that would have the person running the meeting identify and clarify what the rule is and reconsider whether or not the rule is being followed. Similarly, a point of information is another good example of a point that's often raised, where you're seeking clarification on a piece of information that you may not understand or may need more information about in order to make an informed decision when you're voting or debating. And then there's motions. There's essentially 4 major types of motions, and I'll go a little bit out of order here. The main one is a main motion is the primary motion, and that's one that brings a type of business before the school board. So only one main motion can be considered at any given time, and most other motions are somehow related to that motion in one way or another. So that's typically what you think of when we make a motion before we're going to debate something or vote on it. The second one I'll talk about briefly is the subsidiary motions. So this would include things like amendments. That's the most obvious one. Something that's related to the main motion itself, and other types include motions to indefinitely postpone a motion, or a motion to commit a motion to a committee. You're essentially taking action on that main motion with that subsidiary motion that's related to it. The third type of motion is an incidental motion. So these are typically procedural in nature, although they are related to the main motion. They must be decided immediately and aren't subject to debate. So they're taken up right away, unlike an amendment, for instance. And so one example might be if a voice vote is unclear, a member makes a request for members to be polled. That's a good example of an incidental motion. So think procedural in nature. That's how I like to remember it. And then the fourth is privileged. And so privileged motions, they don't relate to the disposition of a currently pending motion. So think of motion to recess or a motion to adjourn, those types of motions. So they take priority over other matters. So even though you might be considering a motion or an amendment, a privileged motion, as the name suggests, means that it takes precedent over other types of motions that can be immediately addressed at that time. And then I have motions that bring a question. So motions that bring a question, really they don't fall under any of the other 4, but they're motions that, similar to the points that I suggested before, they're motions that bring something up to the assembly, or in this case the school board, that's going to ask a question. So motions that bring a question, clarification, prior to voting on the motion. And then finally, yeah.
So you can move to call for the question? That's a formal motion?
Correct.
It doesn't need a second?
It does not. Nope. No, it does not. And you'll notice that it's a good question because there's some gray area here, right? There's some overlap amongst these things. So a point of order might be considered a motion that brings a question. and a point of order may be considered a motion in general, such as a privilege motion. It might fall under multiple categories under some circumstances. So the last two items on the screen here, methods for suppressing debate or hastening action, and methods for maintaining rules and order.
So back on the motions and stuff,
Yes,
an issue that came before us was a motion on the floor, and then an amendment which would negate the intent of the original motion. So the board felt that was out of order because of an amendment that negates. So let's say we're going to paint the wall red, and that's the motion on the floor, and the amendment is painted blue. That was ruled out of order because it negates the motion that's been forwarded, made and seconded. Were we right on that decision?
that's correct.
So, is there a difference between a friendly amendment and a regular amendment?
There is, yep,
Okay.
and it's something that's often confused. So a friendly amendment can be made without debate or vote, okay? So let's say I make a motion, and someone either, I can change that motion, I can alter that motion, or someone else might say, Brian, I'd like to make a friendly amendment to clarify some part of my motion. And if I agree to that, we don't need to debate it and vote on that, what's called a friendly amendment. I can simply agree to it, and in that case, the amendment is changed without any additional debate. And that's the difference between a friendly amendment or a general amendment or a subsidiary amendment, because you can amend an amendment. And in that case, you need to debate in most cases, although not all, and you need to vote, but not in the case of a friendly amendment.
The amendment that Jerry was referring to is one that I made. It did not negate the original amendment. It merely changed one word.
Well, but the issue was that the man on the board felt that the word being changed the whole tone of the original motion.
Let's just tell them what the motion was,
Okay.
that we go to, the motion was we go to optional masking. There was a second, and then the amendment was that we have masking 4K through 12, is that correct, Sue?
It was universal instead of
Universal masking. That was the motion, and then that was the amendment. So,
Well,
the amendment.
I'm not sure the board wants me to give legal advice in open session.
No, but the example is there's the original motion.
Right.
The motion, the amendment would have changed the intent of the original motion. So we ruled it was out of order because the original motion had to go down the tubes first before you could then bring up something that would change the entire.
Sure, and in general, I agree with that concept. That is, obviously there's some debate as to whether or not a motion to amend changes a motion or whether it doesn't, and I think that's the key issue you're asking here. And so I think that is somewhat subjective, but certainly something that the chairperson can rule on in that fashion. And the last two items then, unless there's any other questions on the motions. The last two items, just to wrap up, methods for suppressing debate or hastening action, so things like calls for order of the day, previous question, limit debate, suspend rules. Those are all tools that we can use as a board in order to move things along efficiently. When it comes to maintaining order and those types of rules, you're looking at question of privilege, point of order, which I talked about before, an appeal from the decision of the chair, which is if there's a point of order and you don't agree, parliamentary inquiries or requests for information similar to a point of information that I mentioned before. So some of these will help to move the meeting along efficiently, and others will help to maintain order. But either way, a familiarity with some of these basic concepts, as dry as they can be at times, is a good idea for anybody who's involved in a deliberative body who needs to operate with these types of procedures. So with that, I'll open it up to any additional questions anyone might have. Anything? Yes,
Off a topic, different topic.
you bet.
Holy, and the board knows I scream about this all the time. That is the role of policies. It seems like every meeting, we have just this long list of policies. Is that the role of the board, or are there certain policies which are administrative policies and the rest are operational policies? Such as, if the board says there will be no alcohol on campus, period, okay? Then we don't have to approve a policy regarding students drinking alcohol, visitors drinking alcohol, faculty drinking alcohol, and they're all different policies. Those are operational policies or administrative policies. Our policy is the overall one. No, I'm just using it as an example.
Sure.
But it seems like, in my experience in other worlds, I have never, most industries are trying to reduce the amount of policies through policy reduction committees. In education, it seems like we are overwhelmed with policies, with reams and reams of policies. And they're the same policies, but they just apply to a different audience. And I can't believe those are all administrative policies. Our board policies need to come to the board of directors.
Right, so it's an interesting issue, and anyone who works with schools and school boards knows that schools versus other types of organizations, you're at a ton of policies. Some of those are legally mandated. Some of those are subject to the duties and powers of the board under Section 120, 13, and so some of them have to be there. The duplication, really, that's up to the board in a lot of circumstances. But to get to the heart of your question, it comes down to how do you, as a school community and as a board representing that community, how do you view the role of the board versus the role of administration? And I can tell you that different communities around the state take a different view on that. Some boards are very hands-on, others are more hands-off. But I always think, in my opinion, seeing both sides, I think that a balance is to be struck where the board or the policy makers, generally, not always, but generally the policy makers, and they delegate their authority to the administration, who is responsible for carrying out those policies and to some extent interpretation of those policies. And even the law allows them to even tweak the policies if they're given that authority delegated by the board. But I do think that the administration has some autonomy, unless told otherwise by the board as a body, regarding the interpretation and enforcement of the school board's policies. Any other questions? Well, if there's none, I appreciate your time. Thanks for having me this evening.
I appreciate you being here. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no guests that signed up to speak. So we'll move to the consent agenda. Does anyone have something they would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved by consent, including the donations from Rayburg for the Magnetism, Waves, and Physics of Chemistry project, Leaf and Amy Lottenbach of $1,000 for Destination Imagination, the Lardnice family, a donation of alto saxophones, valued at $800 for the music department. We'll move on to reports then. I just want to say, since we're all wearing masks tonight, if everyone can make an effort to speak from your diaphragm so that not only people on the table can hear, but the camera can hear, that would be great. So we'll move to administrative reports. Mr. Baird.
Thank you, Mrs. Berry. January is one of our busiest months. We finish first semester requirements, register students, start our budget process, and begin a new semester. While doing all this, we continue to move forward on many of our goals. I shared with you the math task force, review of resources, and we just requested purchase of IXL so that we can start moving forward with that committee. We also have a wonderful science donation, which I know we just accepted, so we continue to work on that science goal. This is the time of year where we're finishing our MAP assessment, our winter assessment, so that we can measure student progress, and that is going well. We're just about done with that testing. Some nice recognitions that we received. Our high school math team placed second in conference, which is a great accomplishment. And also our middle school participated in Patriots Pen, which is a writing contest that all the middle school students in Door County participated in. And we had the first, second, and third place winners. So that's a really nice accomplishment for our school as well. Thank you. Any questions?
Just my other question, what's not going on?
What's that?
What's not going on?
The pandemic. All right. Student attendance and staff attendance, which we're going to talk about today, Jerry. But that's the thing that is really not going well.
Mr. Hills?
Thank you. Just want to draw one highlight from the report that I provided you, and that is that we have our spelling bee. This will be the 4th year in a row that we've held the spelling bee. It'll be tomorrow at 1:45. Any of you are welcome to come. We have, a representative from each homeroom, grades 2 on up, and they will go through that. I'd like to also make sure that I mention Justin Skiba. He is instrumental in making sure that this happens every year. He's the one who really kind of pushed to get it off the ground in the first place and organizes everything. So kudos to him and Mr. Showski, who helps him out as well. So thank you to those two. Again, the invitation is open for anybody who'd like to join us.
Is that in this room
It will be in this room.
at 1:45?
1:45.
Any questions for Mr. Hills? Ms. Margot?
Just one quick.
Oh,
Not in February, because I'm not going to be here. For the March meeting, your challenges are all, and I agree that we continue to focus on socially, economically disadvantaged. Could you give us like a 5-minute presentation of what you view those challenges are, what the areas are that are run through the socially, economic disadvantage? Because I think it's really important.
Sure.
And I think it'd be important for all of us to have a much better understanding of what those challenges are and how we as a board or as an organization can help you whatever. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ms. Margot?
In addition to my report, I wanted to talk about and introduce a professional development opportunity that's happening in February for our staff. It is from the Hagerty Phonemic Awareness System. And phonemic awareness, very quickly, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about this at the next board meeting when our English department presents. But it's really, it's a foundational reading skill. And it's how do you identify letters and manipulate sounds in words. So it's foundational. And we have worked with myself and Deb Hurst, who's our reading specialist, have worked with Hagerty to come and do a webinar for our teachers. The targeted teachers to do this are our pre-K through 8th grade ELA teachers, along with our special education staff, our English language learners staff, OT and PT, not PT, our occupational therapists and our speech and language therapists, and we're also inviting every single associate because they're so instrumental in the classrooms and they help guide the instruction. So we want to empower them with the tools that the teacher will also have for the opportunities when they're working with kids. The reason why we want to do this and why we think it's really important is because we really do want to build some sort of universal method to teach phonemic awareness. The whole staff, everyone is using the same system. It transfers through the years, and we really want to build a system to help our kids. So really, really excited to plan that and look forward to letting you know the results. And we're introducing that to staff during our in-service day, and we have a video, kind of like a commercial, where we filmed existing staff who are already doing the Hagerty system, hoping to entice more people to jump aboard. So I'm excited to let you know the results of that. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just wanted to comment on the therapy animals. Thank you for doing that. I have seen success with young people and therapy dogs, and it's fabulous. So often the dogs can accomplish what the humans can't.
Exactly. I know, and we're missing them for sure. So we're excited to have them walk through the front door. So are the kids.
Does anyone have questions on the athletic director's gifted and talented report that they want to direct? Hearing none, we'll move to the superintendent.
You have a district enrollment for 5 years for CESA 7. It was provided to us at a meeting we had recently for the superintendents of CESA 7. You can see we've remained steady over the last 5 years, and that's great shape. You can see others that have had declining enrollment, and then there's a couple that are ticking up on their enrollment. On Friday, I was at a PAC meeting, and the presenter there was presenting on the Sansdemic, which is the lack of people. And the trend is heading that way for the workforce of the retired population increasing and the workforce population decreasing. And they said the trend is going to go until about 2080 or 2090. It's not turning around anytime soon. So they said it's going to be more and more difficult for staffing and finding workers in all fields. And education is no different than all the rest. So yeah, that was it. The other thing, today I canceled the staff Christmas party for Saturday night with change in our COVID. So.
I don't have anything on the property building and security committee. Someone want to comment on that?
Take a day for that.
We met
January 6th.
and went through a lot of different items. Obviously, the athletic field project with the building that is being projected to be built received a lot of attention, partly because of the radio program. I think that Kyle did with Steve
Estes, yeah.
and also to work with Brooke Hank. Electronics, a very significant donation to that, and everybody on the mailing list in the district got the brochure. I'm sure that was a gift. Brochure with the donation. So that project is well underway, and I think we'll be discussing that. Other things that we talked about certainly are the continuing maintenance items on the 65 edition school part. One significance is the locker addition, and certainly there's grade 7.
The 7th grade class is a large class, so when they become freshmen, we won't have enough lockers in the first floor high school to support all the students.
So that's a project probably of somewhere around $80,000 to add additional lockers, upgrade those lockers to a larger size locker than what we already have. Let me see anything else here. A lot of different. Well, we're going to discuss tonight the memorandum of understanding with
Yes.
Thomas Sevastopol, and some additions that the school probably can help the town out with, such as scoreboards and other maintenance items that are going to be in the understanding. So I think the biggest thing is to keep recognizing the needs on the old school, the 1965 part of the school, and continue to do the maintenance and upgrades that we had planned on, basically in our 10-year maintenance plan. So I think that kind of sums up.
One more item is the original playground, which is now for grades 3 through 8. It's in need of some repairs and upgrades. We have a pricing on it, and Mr. Hiltz is going to work with applying for a Raybrook grant to offset some of the cost of the project out there. We'll meet with them next week.
I think it's the week after.
Okay. Yeah, it's the one that he's meeting before the end of the month. Let's just say that. I don't have to say the wrong date. So he is working with Raybrook on that. So. Yeah.
Dave, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think, well, the one piece I think is a small variable as we're coming to the very end of building closeout little issues and stuff like that. The new building, is that, I thought that was a topic we discussed, that we are towards the end of that, I don't know, punch list or whatever. So I thought that was a positive thing.
Probably some ongoing discussion too with the greenhouse addition. And fire marshal issues.
The fire marshal doesn't like the 100% material that we're using on the roof, so he wants some alternate in there, because I can't remember which way it is, 60/40, but I can't remember if it's 60% of what we currently have, if he wants switched, or if he wants 40% switched. It's one way or the other. So Bray and Myron are working with the state inspector on that. We were okay, and then they were reviewing the shading cloth. Our local municipality didn't like it wasn't flame resistant, so they didn't like that. They sent the plans into the state, and the state said, well, wait a minute, we don't like this part now. So, yeah, so we got kind of hung up there. So Bray and Myron are working through it.
Communication Committee did meet on Monday. They are working on the next newspaper, which will be interesting again. As a note, the Patriot Writers, their 3 articles will be printed in full in the Pioneer Times, so you'll be able to read those. And then the group has also been working on award and recognition display, cleaning up some of the trophy cases, and the blue ribbon display, which is in the high school hallway right now, is going to move. Some of the things are going to be reframed to be a little more prominent, and we're going to move it into this room so that it's more publicly noticed. That would be it on that, and then we'll move to the budget report.
Budget report. For the end of December, our cash on hand for Fund 10 was $2.8 million. December 31st is one of our lowest points in the year. Actually, tomorrow will be our low point because of the January 15th payroll, and then she'll start ticking back up. Fund 46, our building fund, is down to $191,000. It dropped about $723,000 this month. That was paying for the phase 1 of the athletic field complex. There's still some money set aside for landscaping, or not landscaping, but evening out some soils out there and some movement. We got in retention because they got to come back and touch it up. And then Fund 49, the building project fund, is down to $150,000. So that was originally $27 million. So.
Question regarding the ESSER 3 money. There is a requirement to conduct local stakeholder engagement with the ESSER 3 funds. Do you have plans yet for that engagement?
Yeah, on Tuesday, the administrative team met with Carl, and we went over ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. ESSER 3 you have until 2025 to use it, and you have to spend your ESSER 2 first. So we're in the process of spending ESSER 2, but we'll have a meeting with the committee to fulfill that requirement as well.
There's going to be a community survey or meeting or?
Well, it'll be a meeting. We'll invite some parents in and have a meeting and go over what we're going to have planned with ESSER 2 and where we're going with ESSER 3.
What are those funds? What are they?
Yeah, there's the federal funds that are in regards to COVID.
Oh, okay.
There's an ESSER 3, obviously it's the 3rd round. And in my meeting with the state superintendent on Friday, she said there may be future rounds coming out if COVID sticks around long enough, and there may be ESSER 4 or more coming down the pipe. We don't know. So we'll be paying for it for generations.
Yeah, kids and grandkids will be paying for it.
Yeah,
Building project is a field project.
For the building, the flooring is now in the 1965 section. We're still waiting for some doors over there. The 3rd door of the Pioneer Room, if you look at the 2nd section from the bottom, you see how it's white and not black. That's got to get replaced. It's on back order. And there's some other door issues. They worked on the sound in the HVAC was making into the ag room and the fab lab area, and they solved that a little bit over Christmas break. We addressed that. Trying to go building. The greenhouse is the other major part of the house.
Any questions on that? If not, we'll move to the field project.
Field project phase 1 is complete, and we have action coming up later on phase 2. when I say it's complete, they're coming back and doing some more landscaping, moving dirt in the spring and fixing up what they don't have. The goal is to have soccer out there this spring. The grass is growing pretty decent, and we'll monitor the field when we use it to see if we're not gonna rip it up terrible. They make a few games out there, maybe they'll get them all, depends on what kind of spring we have, how grass grows in March and April.
You will start to see a thermometer out in front of school to show where they are with the fundraising. The shop, I think on the highway side,
I think,
For the athletic field?
for the athletic.
Right, for phase two.
You know, the traditional thermometer where it goes up with the
I was
elevations.
going to tell you, I thought that was a very professionally well done brochure that went out to all of our homes.
Oh, I did.
You should thank you very much.
It wasn't very well done, for sure. But it is something.
Who did that?
One follow-up on the building, well, the athletic booster club did that, by the way, and the coaches did great. So that's who you're telling your thanks to. The coaches done great on that, led by Brooke Tank, and was already mentioned. And really, Dennis Plur and his team, they really helped out the
Dennis
school
Ford has
a lot.
innovative printing, is great.
Yeah. My follow-up on, if I jump back to the building, is just, are we still moving forward and putting the non-stick, non-slip adhesive surface on some of the stairs?
Not on the learning stairs at this point, those haven't been a problem. We're in the process with Hilliard of figuring out rugs as you come in, because that's gonna be, as we start our first year here, like the terrazzo flooring, when the snow gets on that, it's pretty slick, so we're working on the right type of rugs for winter time. So,
Good.
Legislative report?
Yes, this morning I attended the rural schools board meeting via Zoom, and we talked about the survey results from the school districts that belong to the rural schools organization and the kinds of things that they'd like us to be focusing on for the coming year and for the next budget. Fair funding rated very high with the rural schools group, broadband and infrastructure expansion, rural school teacher and administrative shortages, special education funding, and mental health and health services funding. They're the kinds of things that our members in the Rural Schools Association wanted us to focus on. And that whole teacher shortage thing keeps coming up with every group I meet with. Last night at our CISA board meeting, we talked about the shortage of teachers, the shortage of principals. There are approximately 50 superintendent openings in the state of Wisconsin, according to Jeff Dickert last night. So it really behooves us to pay attention to that and make sure that we are meeting our staffing needs. The Fair Aid Coalition talked this morning with Kelly, our legislative person, and we are going to be proposing categorical aid to increase teacher pay in rural districts. This is something that our Fair Aid Coalition will be discussing at our February meeting. So all of these different organizations are really getting into this whole area of teacher and administrator shortages and looking at funding, particularly from the rural schools perspective, because the game now is teachers may sign a contract today and tomorrow if they get a better offer from another district, they'll take it. So we really need to pay attention to that. Then I noticed today that there is, and some of you probably saw this in Jeff Dickert's update, Excellence in Education. There are 27 school districts in eastern Wisconsin partnering with WFRB Channel 5 to recognize the exceptional school employees. And there are several categories: innovation in work, culture creator in the work environment, social emotional well-being, community involvement, and student connection. And the nominations are due by February 4th. And anyone can nominate a school employee. It can be a parent, a student, a community member, our own staff. So that might be something we want to consider. Certainly would be a nice boost for all that our staff have been enduring through this pandemic. And February 4th is the deadline. You can go online, Excellence in Education, and get all of the specifics on that. Also, we talked so much about broadband in this group, and the Pulse did have a very lengthy article on Door County broadband speed, and what they said was what we've all been saying, the speed here is poor, the options are very poor, and there's money out there now, and we certainly need to take some action on that as a county to improve those broadband speeds here. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. That's all I have.
Thank you. We'll move on to
Chair,
old.
just to add on, if you're interested, somebody just joined us tonight on the 6th, on the 18th at 6 o'clock. The county is unveiling the results of the survey and all that stuff on the internet. They're going to study that this next.
What date is that?
I have it on my calendar, somebody told me just this tonight.
The 18th of
18th.
January?
Yeah, at 6 o'clock. Now, I presume, I don't know where it's at. I think it's important to the school for representatives.
The results of the survey?
Yeah.
Look into that.
Huh?
Pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think the real key is how we all know that the problem, it's how the county decides to organize to solve the problem. If they continue with every little village doing it on their own, it's going to be a mess. We'll finish.
We'll move on to old business. I don't have anything to discuss under board goals tonight, but we did have our presentation by the legal team. I took some notes, and we continue with our superintendent evaluation process. Next would be 21-22 school operations COVID.
On December 30th, North County Public Health sent out the sheet you have in there about the processes for positive or exposed someone positive. This was after the CDC switched the dates. It was it went 5 days home if you're positive and then return wearing a mask for 5 days. They did have it broken down if you expose someone with COVID based on whether they've had a vaccine, completed a series, or had the booster, or if it's been elapsed by 6 months, you're unvaccinated. I, on the 31st, informed the parents that we would go with 10 days mask for all those, whether they're vaccinated or not. I figured at this point the parents had a choice to get their child vaccinated or not, and that was the world that they were choosing to live in. So if they didn't get their kids vaccinated or they got them vaccinated, I wasn't going to differentiate between the two, and we caused more work for our nurse to track who was who. Today, I went to masking for everyone, actually yesterday for today, because we have such staff shortages right now. Yesterday afternoon, Mr. Baer, Mr. Hiltz, and I met, and we came up with a plan of, okay, if we can't get any external subs, where are our internal subs coming from? And then again today, the whole admin team met, we figured out for tomorrow, and we still have a couple backups within internal, provided we don't have folks call in tomorrow. 2 days ago, well, yesterday, we increased by 7 staff members and students were positive, and today we got another dozen, so we're up to 24 active cases right now. The good news is they come back faster. We have Monday off, so that's where we're at currently. We do have still extracurriculars occurring. I would like to go if we have a large group activity here that we have all masked, if it's fans at a ball game or at a concert or whatever, or if it's the away team coming, or officials, whoever it is, everyone's masked at this point. Feedback from parents that some are happy we're going to masking, others are upset just like every other time. And the emails I received were about 50-50. Yes, Anita?
Kyle, could you refresh my memory? Last year when we went completely remote, how do we determine that level of severity? Like, when do we decide it's severe enough that we need to go remote?
When we could not cover all the classrooms with staff.
Okay.
Yeah, when we all decided that's it, we're maxed out. So this year, we have a few other staff members out for non-COVID reasons, which makes it a little challenging. You know, we had 6 maternity or paternity leaves this year. Some are staggered on different days of the week, but that's kind of stretched us out a little bit. One teacher returns on Monday because his paternity leave ends, which is great. So everyone we have is helpful. And how many subs are we expecting in the building? Or how many staff we got absent tomorrow?
8.
How many?
8.
Yeah, it's 8 out tomorrow. So that, we have about 65 teachers and aides. So it's a turning point where we just can't get enough subs or internal coverage. Yeah, Dave?
One clarification, I think you did, there's been discussion on the stuff. So when we have the competitions, the visiting schools will follow our district policy. Is that?
That's what I'm going to announce tomorrow. Yesterday I was thinking, okay, the adult fans can come in and we just control our side of our students and our staff. And now I've decided, thinking about more today, that we're going to go to everyone mask. Because we were contemplating, at what point do we say we've got to go to remote learning? And I don't want to go to remote learning. I don't think anyone does. And so, yeah, so tomorrow I will let all the staff know that any large group activity, if you come here, you got to wear a mask, unless you guys change something tonight. But that's where we're at kind of right now, because we've got to keep our, I mean, yeah, we have students that are out. They're not getting too sick. I haven't heard any hospitalizations of a student yet. We've had one staff member that was hospitalized. There was more to the story than that, but yeah, so. Margaret, you want to
I'm
add
sorry, I
something?
misspoke. 13 out tomorrow.
13.
Yeah, I was just, yeah, we had the long-term and the other non-COVID related absences. So it's really
Right.
13 tomorrow.
And the other thing I would say for people listening, you know, this is,
13 everything.
13 between aides and teachers.
That's staff.
That's
Yes.
13 teachers and aides. That's not
Add it-
custodians,
add it.
bus drivers,
So what's the
secretaries.
denominator in that?
what's a full staff size?
60. 65.
13 out of 65.
And we know we got quite a few come back on Monday, and a few come back on Tuesday, which is good. Just sometimes we're a Band-Aid and limping on, you know.
I was just going to say that because I had some people talk to me too, and I agree with everything, the recommendation, by the way. And I think we've been doing this for, well, about 2 years. And so there is a significant amount of evaluation and discussion that Kyle and his team does on this. And I think I agree with whatever we can do to keep the kids in the classroom. And wherever you are on masks, if it helps the smallest bit, is why we're going to do this. And I think the other thing, if the data becomes realistic, you know, it may go fast because Omicron is spreading quickly. So if it goes through Door County, you know, relatively fast, I don't know what that means. We would also, like we've done before, we would pull away the mandatory masking. And the other thing you clarified is, for competitions, what came up, I think it needs to be fair on both sides, and it's our school district, so if that's our policy, visiting schools need to follow our policy, as we did in the past. When we went to other schools, and they had a higher policy for masking, our athletes would wear masks at that school, even when we weren't mandatory.
That's exactly
So I'm just saying that is correct,
It's
it's fair, and we're doing the best we can to keep kids in school.
And
It's
yes, that
beyond
was
fair, it's beyond fair. Fairness has nothing to do with it. It's protecting our kids.
Very good point, that, yeah, right.
The competition has nothing to do with it. It's protecting.
Well,
Protecting.
there's a layer of people that worry more about the competition
I
than
know
protection,
that.
right? Yeah. I've heard from those folks, yeah.
So, do we have a large supply with our COVID money? Did we buy a large supply of the surgical masks that they hand out to you like when you go to the hospital? Do we have a lot of them?
Are you talking about N95?
No.
No, what do you
Paper
have?
surgical masks. Because now I just I'm a volunteer back in the hospital. According to their sign, and I've heard this, except for that mask. And that's the mask I'm talking about. They're handed out at the hospital. Everything else we're wearing is totally useless for Omicron. the cloth masks the kids come from home are just totally useless because the mesh isn't tight enough. Omicron is a totally different size book. And so therefore, when you come to the hospital, if you got your little, Sevastopol or homemade or Sevastopol mask on, I'll ask you to please take it off.
Mine has a nose bridge, so I can make it really tight.
That doesn't make a difference. This part here doesn't work. I'll hand you one of these before you go past
The
me.
blue one?
Huh?
One that
Blue one?
Dick has.
The one that Dick has?
So I'm just saying, if you're gonna have visitors come that don't have anything, I would suggest that I'm certain, I don't know, that's why I'm asking the question. Do we have cases or boxes of paper masks?
Because it is going to be tough to be the mask police, for a better term.
Right, so if
For a lot of
I'm
visitors are going to
15 or
just
20
roll
or
in.
30 or 50 miles, and I don't have a mask, and you don't have one to offer me like they do at the casino, or the hospital, or different grocery stores in town don't have a printed mask if you don't have one. But these make you feel good, but they're not gonna, if it's for Omicron, this may help a little bit with COVID, whatever, I'm lost with generation, but it plays with Omicron. These will not work, because they're too small. And that's why at the hospital now, we're requiring visitors to wear these masks. And ask people, please put your mask on.
The school has received no information that this mask is.
Actually, the sign of the hospital now says CDC recommends.
Well, you're right, it is emerging, the evaluations of masks are changing, and I think it's hard to consider ourselves the experts in that, to Kyle's point. So I think this school and our community is doing the best.
I'm just raising the issue if you don't have those. And
We have some in the nurse's office, but
You don't
not.
have cases.
We don't have some.
Put all your kids in.
It might be an interesting challenge for purchasing to see if we can get anything available.
Well, you may want to check with the.
I don't know how hard that is and where it's even available, but maybe someone can go online and see if the school supplies are us and order a bunch.
Yeah.
And it'd probably be under ESSER money.
Oh, yeah, let's spend our estimate money.
Yeah.
You know, I think as other communities have gone away from it, and I agree this is going to be continuing to change for this bump up, however long this is.
I just went to Amazon and you can buy 100 pack of medical disposable face masks, 3-ply, for protection for $21.99, and I can order 20
That's
packs.
20. So 20 times 20?
20 times 100.
Okay.
So that's just.
Place your order right now.
Donation next month.
Take order.
I mean, if we have to get them, I don't know if we need to get them or not, but they're out
Don't take
there.
my word for it,
Home Depot has it.
I would consult with the health department.
The school nurse could check with the hospital and see what they recommend.
You should check with the health department.
We'll talk to the school nurse in the morning about it.
Nursing.
Because these are becoming very, very criticized for home.
Well, right, and I mean, this is evolving so fast, so I find this, I need to research and try to learn stuff, but you're right, it's all airborne, right? Before it was all droplets. The Delta variant was all droplets. Well, the Omicron variant isn't, it's airborne. So that's what's emerging, and that's why these studies that are coming out, we just need them to be validated and the proof start coming out. And I hope what they're saying is that the consequences are far less. It's not as dangerous to people, but we'll see if that's in fact the
If you
case.
can't get vaccinated.
I'm going to go back to what Dave said about it spiking quick. That's exactly what the nurse said. She said this one's going up, and she expects it to come down just as fast. If it comes down very fast, I'm going to go back to optional masking.
Right.
Unless you tell me I can't do that between now and the
I mean,
February
you
14th.
can see if you can return all those cases of the math that you got. But,
I'll sell
There'll
them,
be-
I'll sell them to someone else.
There will be another variant
Yeah,
coming
well,
along.
Right, but that's my plan, is if we hit this spike and come back, I'd like to go back to optional masking.
Right, and I
So,
think
Mr.
all the other spikes have done that, and they should do the same.
So Mr. Lukey has the ability to make those decisions on
Yes.
his own unless this board wants to recommend something else tonight.
we're just pointing in the direction with this new information.
Okay. We will go on to item C, the second reading of some new policies. I'll look for a motion to approve those.
I move to approve the second reading of new policies 5500.01, conduct in virtual classroom, Policy 6152.01, waiver of school fees or fines.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Then I'll look for a motion on item D.
Move to approve the second reading first. Second reading of revised policy 0144.3, conflict of interest.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Move on to the field project, phase 2.
On your table, in your packet, you had one price. That was the price that Myron had estimated in April of 21 for a summer project of 22. After adjusting the drawing, after the electronics, and the fact that pricing has increased so much from April till January, Myron has given us a new estimated cost. You can go to page 3 of 3, and the cost of the pavilion would be $1,125,857. Items that I think are interest is there's a scoreboard allowance of $40,000. You could go with a cheaper one and save some money there. There's also a separate standalone ticket booth for $40,000. We could live without the $40,000 ticket booth. But what I'm looking for tonight is a motion to move forward, to go out to bid in February, and have those as options, just like we did with the building project. I think we had 13 on the building project, and we looked at how the bids came in. On page 2, towards the bottom, you'll see that there's a contingency of 10%, so that's $91,958. So it is what it is, but I think with over $500,000 donated already, I think it's time for the board to move forward on it. You heard last month of our fund balance being at 61%. If we operate this year's budget as expected, it'll drop by $687,169, which is still $5.7 million. And on line item 254, you will see in our maintenance building, we have $1 million in the budget. We've spent some of that. We have $927,794 as of the end of December. So what I'm saying is even if we use that, our budget's in great shape. So now is the time to move because it's only getting more expensive. Frank and Myra both said if we go up to bid in February, don't expect to have all the raw materials that you need to have it completed by football season. That's just the way the world is. And Brooke Chang's done a fantastic job, like the rest of the team is looking for donations. She has a couple of trades people that are interested in donating, like countertops and cabinet. We're not talking donating old ones, like brand new. Wood ones, in fact, compared to.
Custom made most likely.
Yeah. So we got some local people willing to do some really good stuff for us. So my recommendation is to move forward with this before it becomes even more expensive.
So you said your fund balance is at what percent?
We're at 61%.
And the recommendation by the auditor is always like about
20 to 25%.
And I read someplace, I think in the packet, that the state's being nervous about.
That was
And
another
that message
thing.
just came through the text rules, that they better watch out what their fund balances are.
Our state superintendent told us on Friday that districts with high fund balances, legislators are starting to have their aides look at different districts and say, well, if you've got this fund balance, you do not need any additional new money. You need to dip in your own fund balance. What the problem with that is they want you to cover annual costs, which are ongoing. The fund balance should keep you so you don't have to short-term borrow and allow you to do one-time projects or one-time purchases. If the state says, oh no, you guys can use your fund balance for your everyday operations, you have those bills every year, and so what they want you to do is go to your piggy bank, and then you don't have things when something pops up. You know, a new school bus is $108,000. 3 years ago, it was like $85,000.
So your fund balance is about how many million?
Our fund balance,
It floats though, I mean, that's the most important thing to realize, is that it floats.
We don't, yeah, but right now, it was at 61% as of June 30th.
I mean, in dollars.
In dollars, at the end of the year, if our budget plays out as we expect, it'll be $5,692,086.
$5,600,000.
$692,086.
And what's your annual operating cost?
So it's about,
11 million.
So you got about 180 days vacation.
We can go down in our fund balance.
No, I mean, you have 180 dollars, in your fund balance, you can have no more dollars coming into the school from any source, and you've got enough to run the school for next year.
Correct. And we only have 3 months we have income coming in that exceeds our
I understand,
expenses.
but
Right.
this is an accounting.
Yeah, if you're doing it that way, yeah. A fund balance of 25% would be $2.6 million. So if we run this year's budget as expected, we'll be at 5.6, and the auditor told us last month 2.6. So we're in good shape to move forward with this, and it's great to have the financial support of the donors that are handing, because they get to be a part of the project and create something great for our kids.
I'd make a motion to approve the field project phase 2.
I second.
Is there any other discussion or questions?
Repeat the motion.
I would like to make a motion to approve the field project phase 2 to initiate that project.
Or for bids.
Out to bids, yes, hopefully, yes.
Hoping it bids.
Any other questions or discussion on the field project? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Second. We'll move to new business and the annual anticipated open enrollment availability report.
We have the grid in front of you of the number of students we know about per grade level, and including the special educational areas, including language arts and CB. We should approve this so that we can start this in it for our open enrollment requests we have, and this is why our enrollment over the last 5 years has stayed steady, because we fill our spots with open enrollment. You'll see a couple of classes where we're negative. That's because we have more residential students than what we have. You have to accept the residents. So basically, I'd like this approved as presented.
Is there a motion to approve that report?
Make a motion. So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion?
what, I mean, is there any time restraints anymore on open enrollment? As far as deadlines?
Yeah, there's a deadline, and then it's closed for a couple of weeks, and then it opens up again. So no, there really isn't.
It's wide open.
Yeah, but if you're looking at ours, and you're looking to come to Sevastopol, and you want to get in, if you had a 4th grader or a 3rd grader with only 4 spots, you're going to want to be one of the first ones to get in. Right.
Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Then the policy committee has a recommendation for all of these additional revised policies. So we will take a motion to accept those policies under item B.
Move to approve the policy committee recommendations of revised policies as listed.
Second.
Questions or discussion?
Would someone explain to me the one policy, I read it over, I don't understand it, and that is the one about non-discrimination based on genetic information of the employee. How do you get the genetic information of employees without permission of the employee? Because that requires a specimen.
Yes, it does.
And you can't take a specimen without their permission. You can't get the results of specimens that have been sent off for something else without their permission. So I don't understand how this could ever happen.
This is a state mandated?
Yeah, otherwise you wouldn't have it in our policy, or it wouldn't be presented if it wasn't there.
I just don't understand how it could ever happen.
You would have to take a sample. if you had a medical exam that was in your file, and we got a hold of the file, we didn't take the sample, but you were at a
You
doctor.
can't get that without my permission.
Right, right.
They can't
Maybe
give
you
it,
gave
they
your
can't give it to
permission.
you, they can't give it to you without my permission.
Maybe you gave your permission.
But then,
Okay, so if we know that information, we can't discriminate on the information we may gather.
you can't know it if I give it to you.
Okay, but say, all right, say we ask the staff, hey, we've been vaccinated, and you give us your answers. Okay, fine, everyone willingly gave it, or some didn't give it. Those we got it, and all of a sudden we say, oh, gee, you're not vaccinated, and we would discriminate and say, okay, we're not.
No, that's not what it says. That's not what it's about.
Genetic.
It's about genetic information.
Okay.
So you're taking blood or tissue and having,
No, we're not.
somebody is.
It'd be the doctor's office that would take it, we wouldn't.
Well,
But if you give us that information that we know that you did something,
you can't get that information.
no, the staff member still could voluntarily give it, and also if we used it and discriminated, that'd be bad. Right?
That's what this sounds like. It's underhanded. You came across you got some information, and now you're going to delve deep into it. That information isn't out there. I give blood for a CBC, or I give blood for pregnancy, or I give blood for, but you give blood for anything else. They don't break it down to get genetic traits.
We're just saying we're not being discriminatory on what we find out, if we find something
It's
out.
about genetic information. It's not about health information.
I think it's hypothetical.
If you want to throw that one out and take it back to the committee, and then you can come over and meet with the old.
Well, here's my comment, Jerry, I guess, it sounds like this is coming from on high, so my follow-on, because we've had some discussion on this, and I don't know if this is possible, right? Who makes these policies? No, Neola administers them, but is it possible to request a briefing from the policymakers of the Department of Education to come up and enjoy Door County and tell us the basis of some of these policies?
Or could you just have the...
It may never happen, but can we do this? If they set these policies and then schools implement them.
Okay, I recommend taking out 312202, put it back to the committee, and Jerry, you're on the committee for
They never get announced to the committee.
So you come to the policy meeting and you could ask Neola where that one generated from.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay. I can't make a motion, I was just.
Would someone like to make a friendly motion?
I'll make a very friendly.
Remove.
Maybe it's like that policy table.
Policy,
Policy what number?
3122.02.
122.02, non-discrimination based on genetic information of the employee. Mr. Work is asking to remove that policy and send it back to the policy committee. Keith Open, you made the motion?
No, Cat did.
Kat, are you agreeable to that?
And Sue today seconded.
We'd make it easier just to take a motion to table that policy.
Well, if you table it, you have to do something with it, so it's going back to the committee.
Go back to the committee.
Motion and a second.
And that requires the approval of the person who made the motion. So, any other questions or discussion on those policies?
And just, again, I don't understand, then why does that appear again? Why is this policy twice?
Because we have different
Employee groups.
employee groups. We have certified staff and uncertified staff, we have administration. And that's the way Neola organizes it by the 100, 200, 300 categories.
Because they all have different policy manuals. All of the employee manuals. The policies are all the same, but they all have different employee manuals.
I would just suggest that sometime for mid-service, could we have that group come here?
Okay, let's vote on this motion first. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. So there's a suggestion that we have Neola come and give us an in-service on how they,
Is that the right group, or who's the group that drives it?
Neola is the organization to which it's a company which handles policies for hundreds of school districts, and it's one we've been using for.
But they don't make policies, they process the books for all of us.
No, they write the policies
write the
and they
policy.
have attorneys vet every single policy.
All right.
Well, so DPI has them write the policy?
no.
No, Neola writes it so we're in compliance with the
DPI
laws
sets
and
the
policy.
rules and they write the policy to follow. I mean, and they're the legal guys, they probably.
My point is, who isn't the people who write the rules that I'd like to hear from? They're writing the rules to say we got to discriminate on all of
The
this.
state won't
Well, then
write
you'd
your
have to-
the state won't write your policies for you.
But they tell the rules. They're
state-
driving the policies. Just
Well, then
like,
you have to have the state come in here and defend every court case
Yeah,
as to why this
I
policy
think-
became effective.
Manager, my question is, they have them come in, I'd like to know if everything they write, that's coming from the state, or some of these policies, are they quote policy experts, and we think as an organization you should have
It's
a
my
policy?
understanding they're coming based mostly on actions that came before the courts. Is
Right.
that correct?
Correct. If you
well,
don't-
maybe it is Neola then. Maybe-
if we don't read those, then we write our own policies.
And you have to have every one of them vetted by an attorney, and it's gonna cost you big bucks.
Well,
For instance,
well,
how did
you-
you-
Point of
you
information.
should. You don't have to. You can write your own and then
Point
get
of
in trouble.
information.
One conversation at a time. Mr. Ludwig.
Well, I'm saying, you can, when Sue says you have to have them vetted by a lawyer, yeah, you should. You don't have to. You can do your own policy.
Well,
but
no,
then
you don't
you
have
get in
to,
trouble
but
later.
you're
Right.
operating on dangerous ground.
Absolutely.
Kyle, I suggest you have Gene Warren come to one of our meetings, either virtually or in person, because this goes on every time we deal with policies, and I think we need to put an end to it.
Keith, you had something to say?
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, some of these policies changes is just a matter of wording, like, you know, him versus her, or whatever. I mean, it's a grammatical or whatever, and I really have no interest in knowing about the policy. I mean, I'm okay with the level that we're at. I mean, it just makes sense.
Dave.
My understanding of this discussion, to be very clear, no one said we don't want Neola doing policies. The question that I understand is we are paying them tax dollars. And I'd like to understand why we're paying them to write all these policies. And they might have a very good answer. That's it, right? We the school, pay this company. So we have every right to get them to brief us on what we're paying them to do and why. And yes, they will say, we need them, but the policy book is just growing. And I'd just like to understand the world we're in. I mean, right? If you paid attention to the policy book, it's grown. And I'd like to know what we're paying for and why.
Okay.
And not that, and that's my question is, I'm coming from a bureaucratic world, dealing with Medicare and Medicaid and all that other crap. I have never seen policies grow. The emphasis is, and I said to the attorney, the emphasis outside is to reduce. The organizations are overwhelmed with policies, and we don't know what policies we have, or we need to look for them. And I would like to have that company come in and defend, because to me, they would, if I was in that business, I'd say to the state, you know, you probably should have some, oh, that's a good idea, we should have a policy. So now I can write more policies to charge you to send out. And then we're going to change he to she for them to, now we're going to get into woke stuff, and we're going to have to change the entire language of all policies, and we're going to charge you more, and you're going to have to go through the same policies, changing the small things.
Okay.
That's all.
Keith?
Are we led to believe that we're charged by the policy, or do we just pay a fee for yearly, hey, take care of us for
We have a
years?
subscription.
Okay, so I mean, I think they do a great job. They keep us in the right. We have policies. I mean, they don't get extra money by presenting us 30 new policies every agenda, right? I mean, it's just part of the stuff that they uncover. As regards to like the stuff we have in today's world versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I mean, the administrators can speak firsthand of all the stuff that they have to live with that we didn't have then. I mean, people, this is, okay, if we need this to have it so that we can move smoothly through the policy section of a meeting without having a lengthy discussion on this, let's get it done. That's
We'll
all.
have that person come and talk to us. Okay. We will look for a motion to approve the resignation of Karen Hain as the elementary library aide.
Move to approve the resignation of Karen Hain, elementary library aide.
Is there a second?
Second.
Did anybody want to comment on Karen's?
Mr. Hill's probably.
Mr. Hills?
Yeah, very sad to receive her letter. She's done an outstanding job for us. She's always willing to step up, help wherever she can, has done an excellent job. Being here in her conversation with me was really time for her to spend some time with her husband and do some things that she'd like to do. She said she's going to miss it here, but she just really felt that it was time. So, again, sad to see her go. We really appreciated having her on board.
Okay, hearing no other questions or comments, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Then we have the Town of Sevastopol memorandum of agreement for the ball field maintenance and park use.
Our athletic committee has met multiple times with the Town of Sevastopol Park, and our 3-year agreement has expired. We have a new agreement, new guidelines which are highlighted. The old fee was $3,500. We didn't know where that fee was ever generated from. Last meeting we had with the parks, they actually gave us a breakdown of their cost. It was approximately $8,600. They added up just a little bit to cover one-time expenses. They had like a lawnmower I had to buy every once in a while. And I said, we bought a lawnmower 8 years ago and we know it's going to wear out because we're grooming your field a little tighter than if we just were cutting it as a part, and those kind of incidentals. This fee would also cover the use of the diamonds by the Mighty Pioneers in the summertime, and Legion, and who was the other group?
They wrote Conan.
Yeah, whatever league that middle group is.
Whatever they are.
So, we also had a great discussion with them about developing a 5-year plan, and they have limited resources, we have limited resources, but if we wanted to do something to get the 2 fields up to WIA standards, they said if you pay for it 100%, go for it and do it. Yeah, there's some minor things, like a couple tarps and weights to hold the tarps down. It's like $150, so we talked back and forth, and they said, if that's something you want to get right now and do it, be done with it, So they've given us that green light. They're trying to get some other projects done over there. I don't know, Pete, Dave, you guys speak up on what.
Well, I think the bigger, what I see is, and the other thing that they also help, because we always question our history. It was a very, very good meeting. They brought all that. They also went into the history, just for an awareness that the data was there, what all the past things they've invested in the field. So it was just a good dialogue. They showed us, we're working better together. It was very good. The bigger picture, I thought, is we're understanding that the right place for our athletes is that field, right next to us. And so over time, I think there's little things that will just be in our maintenance budget. So we will, we'll still approve the memorandum, so we have all the traceability between the organizations. But really, our maintenance budget, over time, they'll have little things like tarps and weights and stuff like that, where our maintenance budget will probably just cover little things like that, as long as, everyone's agreed to what's going on. So I do think it's...
Plus, we have a dedicated community fund aid to handle that, so.
Well, yeah, we can't use all of Fund 80 to pay for all this, because like the expenses that are associated just with the high school softball and baseball, no, but the community part, yes. Yeah, so Carl and I'll figure that out. Yeah, but yeah, we can use Fund 80 for part of it. The portions that improves it for everybody, yes, but if it's specifically for our teams, the state would say, no, you would provide for your team regardless of whether it was at the community or not, so you can't use the community fund, you gotta use your general fund, so that's the technical part, but yes, we will use community fund for part of it.
Cindy?
Kyle, when I reviewed that MOU, I noticed that there's obviously certain tasks that Sevastopol will be responsible for. Have they changed since our last MOU? Like, did we commit to doing more activities?
We have to, because they can't find help in the spring. Their help are high school kids. Well, the high school kids are in class, so they can't get the diamond ready. And last year, was it 6 times we went over and fixed up the diamonds ourselves? So we were taking on that load anyways, and because we were expecting them to get it done, and they'd say, oh no, we can't get it done today, all of a sudden we were scrambling, whereas if it's in our system that, yeah, we know ahead of time this is what we're gonna do, then we just go do it.
I understand that. I was just concerned about the fact that, like, just to drag the field, is that our maintenance department that does that?
That's what's gonna do it, yes.
Because our maintenance department is already taxed. I just remain curious about more
Well, that's
responsibility.
the next item
Okay.
coming up with the Hilliard, yes, exactly, yeah, we're taxed. But we'd rather have it planned and know it
No, I
than
understand
than
that.
when our baseball coaches or Brooke and Carl and I are out there reaping the field, you know? Yeah, so,
Seems,
and I guess it goes back to the workers' shortage first, because they're waiting for our high schoolers to get out.
And that was kind of factored into the cost too with, they did kind of give us credit for work that we did.
Yeah, we went back and, it
You know,
was,
in a sense, you know. so.
Any other questions or discussion on that? Good job to that committee. I was real dubious that you'd ever be able to work anything out. But you did, so congratulations. Is there a motion to accept that or otherwise?
Move to approve the Town of Sevastopol MOA for ball field maintenance and park use.
Second.
Further questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have the Hilliard report.
last month I gave you this because it just came right before the meeting, so I gave it to you in my report. The first page shows you that we're short custodial staff, so I'd like a motion to extend it, get another custodian here. We have ordered the equipment for the tasking needed. It's not here yet, it won't be here for who knows when each piece will get here, but it's at least ordered and we'll go as soon as possible, and then that'll be the next step in our process of getting a program for the building. So tonight, I would like to seek approval to post another custodial position.
Full-time.
Full-time, and it would be on the back shift during the school year for cleaning purposes, you know, not daytime, but keep it at the back, on the back side, yes.
Any responsibilities to the lunch program?
No, no.
Is this an action item?
Point of order, this doesn't say that,
Oh,
so I don't know
okay.
if officially we can, I don't know if officially we can take action.
All right, we'll have to wait.
It's very corrections.
I don't see it listed as an action item.
That's what Lisa just said, yes.
And I'm wondering, when something like this is on the agenda, could we have more description? The average person in the community would not know what the Hilliard report is if they were interested in it. How could they determine if they were interested with just something like Hilliard report? There needs to be more description for our community.
Was that our last meeting agenda? Could be described.
Okay.
We'll look at that.
There's no way to get that approved, right, because it wasn't on an action, no
Yeah.
point of order or
Discussion
agreement
action,
to change
no.
the agenda?
Okay.
Because we can only change the order of the agenda, is that how that
We'll
works?
look at that for the next
Okay.
agenda. We'll look at descriptions for the next agendas, and we'll get this as an action item. I mean, is it something we need to have some kind of special?
Do we need a special meeting for something like this for staff, or we've come this far, so pushing it up 4 more weeks is like,
It's February 10th will be the next one.
because we've been talking about staff and cleaning here for
Right,
a
right.
lot of meetings, and so people.
It'd be nice to get it done, sure.
Well,
Have a special meeting about one item like this for the custodial, that's fine.
I'm not sure it's needed, I'm just asking if the schedule is, because
Well, let's, okay, let's, when we get down to future meetings, let's,
okay, we'll
we
discuss
down to
it.
future
It's
meetings.
on the agenda, I don't think it's missing as an action item. Well, then I think you should tuck it under your COVID report, and we'll take it as part of the cleaning of the operation.
That's kind of a backdoor.
That's all right, that's what parliamentary procedures are for.
We're not doing that.
Okay,
That was real out of
what
order.
if we do like a, we can already, whatever.
We get the future meetings,
We'll
let's
get
set up
to
a
future
special meeting.
meetings.
It'll be a one item.
All right. Does anyone have other questions about that report?
I thought it was a good report, and I'm glad we're taking some action, and I expect after we have some progress on a new position and the whole team, maybe 6 months or something, we should get some feedback if it's actually working out pretty well. I mean, only because the Hilliard report, again, is just a report of their experience, but it'd be good to hear down the road that we are in fact taking care of this, our facility in a way, and the staff agrees with that. I don't know what the time frame is, you know. I guess our building and grounds committee can cover it, so no specific action. Sorry,
Okay.
Mr. Graham.
Then we'll look for a motion to convene to executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote. Dave?
Aye.
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 Motion carried at 8:35 PM. Can we have a motion on the golf coach?
Make motion to approve John Myron, golf coach.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Assistant baseball coach.
Move to approve the hiring of Joe Sawyer as head JV baseball coach / varsity baseball assistant coach.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Motion on the administrative secretary.
What about the,
We don't have one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cindy, I'm going.
No soccer coach.
No, there's no.
Make motion to approve Christine Moe as the district secretary.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Motion on the administrator's contracts.
Recommend approval is discussed.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Future meeting, our next meeting is February 10th. And we talked about possibly a special meeting for
Custodial position.
custodial, and maybe we could roll those finances into that, if you have time to get them done. The finances
Depends what
for,
week we're doing the meeting.
for Margaret.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
Could we,
what kind of time you need for that?
well, I'm going to the school board convention next week. Could we do it the week of the 31st of January, or for something like 31st, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, something in there?
How does Thursday the 3rd work for anybody? Everybody?
Thursday the 3rd
I'm eating oysters.
does not work.
You're
for me.
going, okay.
I can't, I guess I'm.
If we're to the 3rd, do we need a special meeting, or do you want to wait till the next board meeting, just for discussion? If we want to have it, let's have it.
Otherwise, could we go with Tuesday the 1st work, or no?
Tuesday the 1st?
No, that whole week doesn't work.
That whole week doesn't work.
Works for me.
Can we do it the end of January?
I can't.
Okay. The 27th,
27th of January?
January 27th is a Thursday.
I'll still be here.
Yeah, but that's all right.
I'll still be here.
I think we're not going to get everybody, so we've got to have a majority.
27th?
I'm here 27th.
You can be, you're here
I'm
the
here
27th,
27th of January.
27th?
Yeah.
then we'll go the 20, Keith,
I think
we'll
so.
go the 27th of January, so
I'm pretty close.
can we go at 6 o'clock?
On the 27th?
Send out a memo.
27th at 6?
Can you make that, Keith?
I think so. It should be.
Okay, if there's no other business, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
That doesn't work for me, I'm sorry.
Well, adjourned.
We still have a quorum.
We can vote on adjournment?
Aye.
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 Who seconded that, I'm sorry? Motion to adjourn. Who seconded?
Me.
Dave Cackett.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
We're adjourned at 10:55 PM.